Welcome to part 2 of what is the most enchanted golden apples that a single desert temple can generate. In the first video, although we found a temple with 7, we disappointingly did not definitively answer the question. Although I said that calculating loot for temples with 3 notch apples was too expensive, I came up with a few optimizations that made it viable. To recap how loot generation works, each chunk has a population seed that is a function of its x and z coordinates and the world seed. A small constant is added to the population seed, and a Java random object calls setSeed on the result. This random object has 4 consecutive next long calls made on it, with each one seeding the loot generator for one of the 4 chests in a desert temple. This loot generator then calls nextInt3 and adds 2 to pick how many rolls it makes. This many times it calls nextInt232 to select an item from the loot pool, which is an enchanted golden apple if this call is 215 or 216, and if necessary, it makes another call to select the number of items. Our first step will be to find all loot seeds that produce at least 3 enchanted golden apples. God apples are in the good loot pool, which is rolled at most 4 times, so we can split this into 3 cases. The first case is 4 rolls with the first, second, and fourth being God apples. The second case is 4 rolls with the first, third, and fourth being the notch apples. The third case is 3 or 4 rolls with 3 consecutive enchanted golden apples. For the third case, we can reuse the trick of the last 3 bits of nextInt depending only on the lower 20 bits of the seed. Then we use an additional trick that I came up with after the last video. If we let the seed we are analyzing be the value that is bit shifted right by 17 and has its modulus returned, we can only check every 29th value for the upper 28 bits, because we know the value of the upper 31 bits modulus 232, and each increment of the upper 28 bits increases the upper 31 bits by 8, so adding 29 to the upper 28 bits increases the upper 31 by exactly 232. This makes the calculation relatively quick, and we find about 180 million loot seeds for case 3. Note that case 3 includes 3 subcases, 4 rolls with the 3 god apples being at the start, 4 rolls with them at the end, and only 3 rolls. It is much more efficient to find states of the random generator that produce 3 consecutive enchanted golden apples, and see if these states can be stepped back to a loot seed corresponding to any of these 3 subcases. For cases 1 and 2, one thing to note is that the first few items in the loot pool all have a range for their quantity, whereas the last few items always have only 1. This means that if the nextInt 232 call is less than 125, an extra nextInt call is made, for which we don't care about either the parameters or the returned value. This means that for case 1, we want nextInt 232 to return 215 or 216 on either the first and third calls or the first and fourth calls, and for case 2 on either the second and third or the third and fourth calls. In order to save time on the second case, I first check if the third call will produce the desired value. This only requires one multiplication, as for a given LCG, there exists another LCG that can step the first LCG either forwards or backwards by any integer number of steps. Case 1 and 2 each produced about 60 million seeds. The calculations for case 1 and 2 were much more time consuming than those for case 3, despite producing fewer seeds. Now that we have the 300 million loot seeds that produce 3 or 4 notch apples, we can brute first the possible random generator states that would produce these seeds with the next long call, as discussed last video. Then we consider that loot could generate in the first, second, third, or fourth chest in the temple, so we check all of the 1.2 billion possible population seeds, and find that only 4 produce 8 enchanted golden apples, and none produce more. At this point, we finally have a definitive answer to our initial question. It is impossible for 4 chests containing 2 or fewer god apples to produce a total of more than 8, so the most enchanted golden apples a desert pyramid can generate is 8. Picking one of the 4 population seeds with 8 notch apples, we can find our desired temple in the seed 844 trillion, 425 billion, 567,131,980 at x equals 22,800,384 and z equals -9,521,136. That concludes the video. Thanks for watching.